The Cursed Table, a deal you'll regret. David was a young man living in a small suburban town in England. As a passionate collector of antiques, he often scoured platforms like Facebook Marketplace for rare finds at bargain prices. One late evening, while scrolling through the listings, he stumbled upon a peculiar wooden table with intricate designs. It was being sold at an unbelievably low price. The post had no description, just a single photograph taken in a dimly lit room. The seller used the name Hidden Seller and provided no personal information. Intrigued, David sent a message. To his surprise, the reply came almost instantly. "If you're interested, come to 13 Black Hollow Road." The location sounded strange, but the allure of the deal and the table's craftsmanship convinced him to go. When David arrived, 13 Black Hollow Road loomed out of the thick fog of the night. The house was old and decrepit, with peeling paint, shattered windows, and a lone, flickering light bulb hanging from the porch. The front door was slightly ajar, revealing a dark interior. David called out, but no one responded. Cautiously, he stepped inside. The beam of his phone's flashlight illuminated dusty walls, damaged paintings, and a suffocating, musty smell. In the center of the room sat the wooden table, exactly as it appeared in the photo. But what caught David's attention and sent a shiver down his spine was that it rested on a circle carved into the floor, filled with ancient, indecipherable symbols. While David was inspecting the table, a gravelly voice spoke from behind him. "You've arrived." He spun around to see a gaunt man dressed in black, his face obscured by the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. "I'm here for the table. Here's the money," David said, trying to mask the unease in his voice. But the man didn't move. Instead, he gave a crooked smile and said, "The table isn't for sale. It has chosen you." Before David could question him further, the man melted into the darkness as if he had never been there. A chill ran down David's spine. He quickly dragged the table out of the house, loaded it into his car, and sped away, ignoring the growing unease clawing at his thoughts. Back home, strange things began happening almost immediately. That first night, David was awakened by soft, persistent tapping sounds. Initially, he thought they were coming from outside, but the noise clearly originated from the corner of the living room where the table now stood. Upon inspection, the once smooth surface of the table was now marked with faint engravings, symbols eerily similar to those he had seen at the old house. The strange occurrences only escalated. Lights flickered without explanation, and small objects placed on the table seemed to move on their own. One night, while typing an email for work, David felt an intense sensation of being watched. Turning around, he found nothing but the oppressive darkness of his apartment. Terrified, David decided to investigate the origins of the table. He posted a photo and his story on an online antique forum, hoping for answers. A member quickly messaged him, warning that the table was cursed. It once belonged to an aristocratic family in the 19th century, known for their involvement in occult rituals. During one ritual, they accidentally summoned a malevolent entity. After that, the entire family vanished without a trace, leaving the table as a conduit for lost and restless spirits. Determined to rid himself of the cursed object, David attempted to remove the table from his home. But as he dragged it toward the door, an unseen force anchored it in place. The room grew icy, and David felt invisible, freezing hands gripping him tightly. A sinister whisper echoed in his ear. "You cannot escape." Panicked, David grabbed a hammer and smashed the table into pieces. Splinters flew everywhere, but instead of relief, he noticed that the symbols from the table were now etched deeper into his apartment floor, spreading across the room like living veins. David fled his apartment and never returned. A week later, while aimlessly browsing Facebook, he stumbled upon a chillingly familiar post. Antique wooden table, price to sell. Address: 13 Black Hollow Road. His blood ran cold as he realized the table was still searching for its next owner. Would you dare to buy a bargain piece of furniture from the internet again? Whispers in the woods. Sam and Claire were avid hikers, always looking for new trails to explore. They'd read about a remote trail in Asheville, North Carolina, that promised breathtaking views and the serenity of untouched nature. It was perfect, a weekend getaway from their busy lives in Atlanta. What they didn't expect was the malevolent force awaiting them in the woods. It was late afternoon when they arrived at the trailhead. The dense forest was alive with the hum of insects and the distant rustling of leaves. The couple set off with their backpacks, laughing and snapping pictures. The trail was picturesque, winding through towering pines and ancient oaks. As the sun dipped lower, a golden light filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the path. About an hour into their hike, they noticed something peculiar. An unnatural silence had descended upon the woods. The cheerful chirping of birds and the buzzing of insects had ceased entirely. Claire glanced at Sam, uneasy. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Sam stopped, listening intently. "Hear what?" Before Claire could respond, a soft rustling came from the underbrush ahead. It wasn't the sound of an animal scurrying away. It was deliberate, as if someone or something was moving towards them. Sam brushed it off. "Probably a deer," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. They pressed on, but the feeling of being watched lingered. Claire kept glancing over her shoulder, her steps quickening. Sam tried to reassure her, but he too felt a prickle of unease. The woods, which had initially seemed so inviting, now felt claustrophobic. As dusk approached, they decided to set up camp in a small clearing. Sam pitched the tent while Claire gathered firewood. When she returned, her arms full of sticks, her face was pale. "There's something out there," she said. I don't know, a shadow, but it wasn't shaped like an animal." Sam tried to laugh it off, though he couldn't deny the growing tension. "It's just your imagination. These woods can play tricks on you." They lit a fire and ate in relative silence, the crackling flames doing little to dispel the oppressive darkness creeping in around them. As night fully descended, the forest came alive with strange noises, distant whispers that seemed to echo through the trees. At first, Sam thought it was the wind, but the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They weren't random. They sounded like voices, though the words were unintelligible. Claire clutched his arm. "Let's go back," she pleaded. "Claire, it's pitch dark. We'll get lost if we leave now," he reasoned. But even as he spoke, he wasn't sure they'd be safe staying where they were. Suddenly, the fire sputtered, as if an invisible hand had tried to snuff it out. They both jumped, and Claire let out a small scream. The whispers stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that pressed down on them like a physical weight. Then they saw it. Standing just beyond the edge of the firelight was a figure. It was tall and cloaked in shadows, its features obscured. But its presence was undeniable, radiating a malevolence that made Sam's blood run cold. He grabbed Claire's hand, pulling her into the tent. "What the hell was that?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know," Sam said, his voice shaking. He fumbled for his flashlight and shone it outside, but the figure was gone. The night dragged on, every rustle of leaves and creak of branches amplifying their terror. At some point, exhaustion overtook them, and they drifted into a fitful sleep. When they woke, the sun was just rising, casting a pale light over the forest. Relieved to have made it through the night, they quickly packed up and set off back down the trail. But the unease hadn't left them. About halfway to the trailhead, they stumbled upon something that stopped them in their tracks. There, in the middle of the path, was a crude wooden effigy. It was human-shaped, made of sticks and bound together with vines. Hanging from its neck was a necklace of bones, small, animal bones, but unsettling nonetheless. "This wasn't here before," Claire said, her voice trembling. "Let's keep moving," Sam said, grabbing her hand. They hurried down the trail, the forest closing in around them. Every so often, Sam glanced over his shoulder, certain they were being followed. But each time he looked, the path behind them was empty. Finally, they emerged from the woods, gasping with relief as they reached their car. As they loaded their gear into the trunk, Claire froze, her eyes wide with horror. "Look!" She pointed to the back window of the car. There, etched into the dusty glass, were 3 words. "You can't leave." Heart pounding, Sam yanked open the driver's door and started the engine. They sped away, the forest shrinking in the rearview mirror. But the unease lingered, a dark cloud that followed them back to Atlanta. For weeks after, they were plagued by nightmares, visions of the figure in the woods, the whispers, and the effigy. And every time they woke, they found the same message scratched into the windows of their apartment. You can't leave. They never went hiking again. The roommate's shadow. Emma had always been excited to move into her university dorm. It was her first taste of independence, and she couldn't wait to decorate her side of the room and bond with her roommate, Claire. The dorm itself was old, built in the 1960s, with creaky floors and a faint musty smell that lingered no matter how much air freshener you used. The first few weeks went well. Claire was quiet and polite, spending most of her time studying or watching movies with her headphones on. Emma often joked that Claire was the perfect roommate, barely noticeable. But then strange things began happening. It started with small noises. At night, Emma would hear soft whispers coming from Claire's side of the room, even though Claire was fast asleep. Sometimes, she would wake up to the sound of scratching, like nails on wood, but when she turned on the light, there was nothing there. One night, Emma woke up to the sound of shuffling. She squinted in the darkness and saw Claire standing by the window, staring out at the courtyard below. "Claire!" Emma called softly. Claire didn't respond. She just stood there, her shoulders stiff, her head tilted slightly to the side. After a moment, she turned and walked back to her bed without saying a word. Emma tried to brush it off as sleepwalking, but the image of Claire's blank expression haunted her. A week later, Emma returned to the dorm after a late-night study session at the library. The room was dark, except for the faint glow of Claire's desk lamp. Claire was sitting at her desk, hunched over, her back to Emma. "Hey, Claire," Emma said, tossing her bag on her bed. Claire didn't reply. Emma frowned and walked closer. "Claire." As she got nearer, she noticed something strange. Claire's shadow, cast by the lamp, didn't match her movements. While Claire remained still, the shadow seemed to twitch and shift, its limbs elongating unnaturally. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She stumbled back, knocking over a chair. The noise startled Claire, who turned around, her eyes wide. "Are you okay?" Claire asked, her voice shaky. Emma hesitated. "Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you." That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She kept glancing at Claire's bed, half expecting to see her standing by the window again. The next morning, Emma decided to confide in a friend, Lily, who lived down the hall. "Do you think I'm imagining things?" Emma asked after recounting the strange occurrences. Lily's face paled. "You're in room 213, right?" "Yeah, why?" Lily hesitated before speaking. "There's a rumor about that room. A few years ago, a girl named Sarah lived there. She had a roommate who wasn't quite right. People said the roommate used to talk to herself and stare at the walls for hours. One night, Sarah woke up to find her roommate standing over her bed, just staring. Sarah moved out the next day. But after that, the stories got worse. People said they saw shadows moving in the room even when no one was there. Eventually, the university stopped assigning anyone to that room for a while. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. "But Claire seems normal." "Well, mostly." Lily shrugged. "Maybe it's nothing. But if you're feeling weird, you should trust your instincts." That night, Emma decided to stay awake and watch Claire. She pretended to be asleep, her breathing slow and steady. Around 2 a.m., she heard the sound of shuffling. Opening her eyes just a sliver, she saw Claire sitting up in bed, staring directly at her. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, but she stayed still, hoping Claire would lie back down. Instead, Claire stood and walked over to Emma's side of the room. She stopped just inches from Emma's bed, her face blank and lifeless. And then Claire spoke, but her voice sounded distorted, like two people talking at once. "Why did you come here?" Emma couldn't take it anymore. She bolted upright and screamed. Claire didn't react. She just stood there, staring. Then, slowly, her shadow began to move again, stretching up the walls and across the ceiling. Emma grabbed her phone and ran out of the room, not stopping until she reached the lobby. She spent the rest of the night on a couch in the common area, too afraid to return. The next morning, she told the resident advisor what had happened. They agreed to let her switch rooms, but when Emma went back to gather her belongings, Claire was gone. Her side of the room was completely empty, as if she had never been there. When Emma asked around, no one could remember Claire moving in. In fact, no one in the dorm seemed to know who Claire was. All that remained in room 213 was an eerie silence,